On April 9th, 2013, Star Wars The Old Republic's first expansion, Rise of the Hutt Cartel, is released to early access players. Many people view Rise of the Hutt Cartel as one of the more underwhelming expansions, and I've been on record saying that this is my favorite expansion. And after playing it about 6 months ago with my wife, I can confidently say that it is still my favorite expansion to come out of the Old Republic. For some brief context to set us up for the video, Rise of the Hutt Cartel comes after some of the more major updates in the game, with the addition of the Rackle Flashpoint, Kaon Under Siege, and Lost Island. Players like myself were excited about that update and knew that an expansion was right around the corner, so Bioware had to live up to the hype. And in my personal opinion, they did just that. They kicked off prepping for the expansion in 1.7, called March to Makeb, where we were introduced to our very first double experience weekend, and this is where I went from basically having 4 characters to 24. So like I said, the prep and hype for this expansion was real, and it didn't disappoint, at least for me. After defeating Karaga the Hutt in the Karaga's Palace operation, Tabora the Hutt took control of all operations. Seeing a weakened Republic and Empire, Tabora saw an opportunity to continue the Hutt expansion onto the planet Makeb, so they invaded the system with the aid of a mercenary group known as the Regulators, and basically enacted martial law and began stripping the planets of most of its resources, especially Isotope 5, the main resource that you're tasked with getting. On the Republic side, you're basically tasked with stopping Taboro and helping the people of Makeb take back their home world, and fend off the Imperials. On the Imperial side, you're tasked with seizing Isotope 5 at any expense for the good of the Empire. Both sides had differences in their story, but overall, the ending was pretty much the same. You either put the Republic or Empire over the people of Makeb and seize the opportunity for yourself and the respective factions, or you stabilize the planet and drive off/kill Taboro and the Regulators. Overall, I found the story in this expansion to be pretty compelling, mainly because this is only one of 2 expansions that had realistically kept the war between the Republic and the Empire front and center. The Eternal Alliance hadn't been formed, and there was very little cross-faction team-up. But since this really isn't a story review or recap, I wanted to move on to what I think is more impactful in the game's first expansion, and why I think it's probably one of the most slept-on expansions of the entire game. Rise of the Hutt Cartel brought along your classic staples of MMORPG expansions. We got the new planet, Makeb, 2 new hard mode flashpoints in Hammer Station and Katamino variants, and each subclass got a brand new ability, along with other perks on the ability tree, which to this day I miss a lot. It was one of the more intricate spec trees where you really could play around with your own build and create interesting hybrids that led to unorthodox but fun gameplay. The new abilities weren't just fun to use, some of them were needed to address various class balancing issues. The Commando/Mercenary got the Electronet, which helped with getting dived by melee users in PvP, and the Sorcerer/Sage class got the Force Barrier, as they were one of the glass cannons of the game. The dual saber throw was a fan favorite, and players had been requesting one for their Marauders and Sentinels. It also just helped with differentiating between their Guardian and Juggernaut counterparts. While most of those abilities added much needed balance, there were also changes made to classes that furthered and balanced play. The 2.0 AP hybrid spec for the power tech will probably go down as one of the most broken specs of the entire game, especially in PvP, where you just basically could 2-shot any DPS or healer unless they were top 3 in ranked or something. I don't remember too much of that, to be honest, but like with any expansion, when you fix something, you end up breaking something else. We also were given 2 new operations in Legions of Scum and Villainy, the more traditional method, and a mini operation called Taboro's Courtyard. Along with these major updates, the game got smaller additions which added much needed depth to the game. McKeb's design is one of the best in the entire game. It has a mix of pretty much everything you can find in a world that's in Hutt space. You have more refined looks of the estates and cities, and the architecture has a Coruscant and Tython feel to it, and the waterfalls are similar to planets like Alderaan. There's even a waterfall that was polluted by all of the mining going on. To that point, you also have these mining facilities and mesas, which felt so expansive and deep. They still feel that way as I'm running around gathering the footage to show you. I was reminded of the depth and beauty of a world caught under Hutt control. McKeb is just a really good example of a well-done planet for an expansion. It kept up with what we knew in the base game of these massive worlds with plenty of exploration. The Seeker Droid and micro-binocular missions reimagined the existing planets in the game at that time, and I'd argue that they still offer that new way to explore the worlds. The questing is solid and offered a good reward for your efforts.
If you are surprised to hear me on a secured channel, then it's clear you have no idea who you're dealing with.
I have a great memory of doing Seeker Droid quests with my friend Carlia. One of the things that I think has slowly gotten away from the game over the years is the lack of exploration in these new zones that have been introduced. The Seeker Droid mission prompted you to really explore every corner of the planets you were on, because most of the time you really didn't need to explore when doing the main quest line for your class. Granted, back in the day, you did need to complete other planetary quests to get the necessary XP to continue the progress through your story, so you did do some exploration as a necessity and for fun. Around this time, they reintroduced the Gree event, and this was more my speed as it combined PvP and PvE elements. You had these dailies to complete that helped you level up your reputation and unlock rewards. It's pretty standard in MMOs these days. You had the Grey Seekin Operation boss for the PvE community, and on the PvP servers you had daily quests that involved going into PvP zones on Ilum to return orbs collected on the planet. The whole event area was PvP depending on your server, and on my server at the time, Junma, the PvP scene was pretty active. This was an activity that I would regularly participate in. I would spend hours wandering the zone and killing anyone that I could find. It was a really unique and fun experience to be a part of. Following the PvP side of things, 8v8 ranked would be removed from the game and replaced with 4v4 arena deathmatch. The player base had struggled to keep 8v8 ranked going, but it's not really their fault if I'm being honest. Bioware had delayed starting actual PvP seasons for essentially the first 3 years of the game, so PvP players went back to games like WoW where the PvP had already been established. I participated in the 8v8 ranked pre-season, and I have the Deadly Contender titles on Connecticut, my operative, and Shinku, my mercenary. To this day, they are my favorite titles to wear, and I do feel quite proud of them. The removal of 8v8s and the addition of 4v4s was a desperate move by Bioware at the time to keep the community engaged after they realized they weren't going to be able to support 8v8 in the long run. While there were many people who disliked the story of this expansion, they failed to see what the overall expansion really did for the game. Rise of the Hutt Cartel had something that was quite literally for every kind of player. You had new operations for group content, you had the Seeker Droid and micro-binocular missions for solo players or people who wanted to do them together because they were group phases, and to me, this was almost prime Swtor. Guilds were expanding, content creation for the game was at an all-time high. It was a time to be hopeful, and even though things like ranked 8s were replaced, it felt like there was still weight behind the expansion. I'm sure you've noticed by now that we've gotten, 8 to 9 minutes into the video, and we haven't really talked about the Cartel Market. And that's because the Cartel Market wasn't a really big deal at that time. It had really cool items, and by and large, the community was receptive to it at first. The introduction of the Cartel Market obviously predates 2.0, and the community didn't seem to mind having a cash shop, because as we've talked about in this video, there was plenty of content to do in the game no matter what type of player you were, and the Cartel Market really just enhanced that experience. It's not like it got super heavy on the reskinning of items we already had on day one. That was more of a gradual shift and something that I won't be talking about in this video. And before anyone talks about how I haven't mentioned one of the greatest updates in all of Star Wars The Old Republic, the Dread War, that will have its own video. Don't worry, I did not forget. It just deserves its own spotlight. I think one of the things that I enjoyed the most about Rise of the Hutt Cartel is the fact that it just seemed so full of life. It seemed like people were everywhere running to and fro, and it just felt more alive than it does today. And I know part of that is because of a little bit of nostalgia and the fact that I was a teenager when this came out, and so it seemed a lot bigger. And even going back and replaying it, it still feels that way, just with less players actually in the game. Taking a look at Rise of the Hutt Cartel pretty much 12 years after its launch has been an eye-opening experience, not just because I got to relive my favorite expansion, but because it truly had all of the things that players now have been asking for. Obviously, the game is in a much different spot now, and the player base has shifted its expectations somewhat. But I would say if Broadsword was to release an expansion with all of the elements that Rise of the Hutt Cartel had, the revival of the game would be all but certain. If you've been playing the game since launch, or maybe you started playing during the first expansion, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that the following expansion, Shadow of Revan, would not be known universally as Prime Swtor had it not been set up by the Rise of the Hutt Cartel and the following smaller updates. 2.0 was a base to build from, and I truly believe it was an underrated baseline. When talking to veteran players about Rise of the Hutt Cartel, I've mentioned before that they weren't really into the story, and the only reason I could really get from them was that it really didn't focus enough on the Force using perspective of the game. It was definitely more, well, clearly the Hutts, right? And there are no Force-sensitive Hutts in the game at this point, but I think it gets a bad rap just for a lot of the changes it did introduce in that time. And looking back on it, the solo player already started to benefit from that expansion. The Seeker Droid and Micro-Binocular missions, like I've mentioned a couple times already, really were done solo, and that only continued as the game continued to age. I just had this feeling, or maybe I misremembered it, but maybe it's because I was a kid or something, but I thought that there was a lot more group content being released, and there definitely was, but these solo focused or these soloable quests were just done with other people, at least when I was playing. So in my head, it kind of counted as group content, but as I'm replaying this, it really was solo, and the people in the world did enhance that solo experience. I mentioned doing the Seeker Droid quests with a friend, and we were in probably Mumble at that time with everyone else doing a variety of different things. So maybe it wasn't the fact that Rise of the Hutt Cartel had a ton of group content, which it did, but it also had solo content that people did together, and I think that is something that can't be overlooked when talking about this expansion, because this did lay the foundation for everything else to come, good and unfortunately bad. I hope you guys enjoyed this little retrospective of Rise of the Hutt Cartel. I do plan on doing every single expansion, and I hope to have those done really as I have time to do them, but I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to subscribe, and if you're still watching, feel free to join my membership program. It's nothing crazy, it's just a way to support the channel. Very broad, very basic stuff. Thank you guys so much for spending your time with me today. I appreciate it, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.